Hi everyone, my name is Trent Scrivner and I was asked to share some of my story with you. I'll start with my wife and I. We had been attending Life Church since 2011, just as consumers at the point. So in 2015 we started to take some steps in our spiritual walk, and so we joined the host team at Mustang Life Church as they were opening up a new campus. We also committed to the tithe this year. We also got married and went on our honeymoon and various other trips and vacations throughout the year. It was a great year. I was making pretty good money for a 24-year-old kid in the oil field at the time. Life was great. In 2016, as the oil field started to crash, the company I was working for, they shut their doors that April. So I'd experienced my first loss of job security per se, but it didn't last long. I landed a job with the power line company the very next week as an equipment operator. So this job would carry us through July, where I was able to jump on with another oil field company, and we also completed the purchase of our first home in the month of July. So after the move into our new house was complete, I took off to work for the new oil field company, where my first stint was expected to be 20 days. So 9 days into this job would be August 4th, 2016, the day that would change me forever. After rigging down a location, my crew and I, we piled into the crew vans around 7:30, 8 o'clock that evening to go to town to get something to eat before heading back to the hotel. And little did I know this was the last thing that I would remember for about 4 days or so. My crew van was involved in an accident with a semi-truck 10 miles east of Kingfisher on the back roads at an unmarked intersection. The impact of this accident would eject me from the van, where they found me about 30 to 40 feet from the scene. I would soon take up my first helicopter ride, and they were transporting me to OU Med Center, where my wife, family, and friends, and very extended church family would wait through the night and hope and pray that I would make it through the night. The injuries I had sustained were a basal skull fracture, 6 broken vertebrae, fractures in both of my scapulas. I fractured my sternum. I had 2 severed tendons in my left arm and a broken right femur. About 5 days went by, I think, before I really understood what was going on, and at this time they were transporting me by ambulance to Mercy Rehab Center, where I would spend the next 2 weeks rehabbing, per se, learning how to get out of bed and learning how to walk again. Once my milestones were met, I was released to go home, where I would spend the next 10 months on workers' compensation and attend physical therapy. I spent the first 3 months I was in a neck and a back brace, and at the peak of my physical therapy, I was attending 7 sessions a week. Not too long after returning home from the hospital, we received my first work comp check in the mail. The amount of this check was $589.33. That was the most that Oklahoma would pay on work comp at the time. My wife and I soon added up our new monthly bills with the new home and everything, and quickly realized this was not going to be enough money to get through the months to pay our bills. So this created a lot of fear and anxiety that I allowed to creep into my mind, and really began some of the darkest days and hardest days of my life. There were a lot of questions that came into play. Should we continue to tithe? My wife and I had discussed tithing previously was easy. I had somewhat of a cushion in the bank. I was making pretty decent money. I'd never been stretched financially. Now all of a sudden the devil had a hold of me and was telling me that I couldn't afford to tithe. Fortunately, through my wife's tremendous amount of faith and lots of prayers, we stayed committed to the tithe. We committed to tithing out of each check that we received in the mail, and not knowing how we're going to make ends meet. But it couldn't have been 2 days after we tithed out that first check that my wife walked to the mailbox and found an envelope that had cash in it, about $300 exact. This kind of thing would continue to happen for months. People would send us a check in the mail, hand deliver us cash. My dad's auction company would have an opportunity for my wife to work and make some extra money. Men from the church were taking care of our yard. People were showing up with food by the masses. It was crazy. I'd never experienced anything like this before, but we knew God was working miracles through our small step of obedience. This season of life would create a lot of strain on our marriage between my wife and I, but it also provided us an opportunity to really start to grow as Christians. Through all the tithing and commitment that we stayed and the obedience that we had, I'll tell you that we never missed a bill. We never missed a single bill. Every time money showed up, it was just enough to get us through the month. So in 2017, as we were starting to grow as Christians, we were asked to become leaders of our host team. We started a small group this year. I joined a men's group, and I started to seek out mentorship for the fears and anxiety that I was still dealing with. I was also blessed with a career in the insurance industry at this time, which was a huge blessing because I wasn't physically capable of going back to work in the oil field. 2018, we were blessed with the birth of our first daughter. Fast forward to 2020, we have another one on the way, and we were also called at this time to make a move to Trinity Baptist Church. I couldn't tell you why we were being called. I couldn't pinpoint a reason why. I'd grown up in this church. I was baptized in this church. My parents had recently moved back, but I still couldn't tell you why God was calling us to move. We were so involved at Life Church Mustang. My wife and I used to say there's no way we could ever leave with all the relationships that we had built and the spiritual growth that we had experienced through the toughest valley in our lives. But this calling was real, and we wanted to be obedient, so we took the step of faith to make the move in February of this year. And as I'm sitting here today, blessed with this opportunity to share some of my story with you, I believe it is just one of the many reasons that God has called us to move. I've prayed and prayed that God would work through me in this moment and through this story. August 4th, 2016 began some of the darkest days of my life. There was so much pain, there was so much fear, there was so much anxiety. It brought to surface so much selfishness and pride that I didn't realize I had. This day would also be one of the best days of my life in retrospect. It allowed me to experience so much spiritual growth. I'm in such a different place than I was before my accident. My wife and I, we are full of faith and joy now. I try to seek godly perspective now instead of my own, which brings to mind a Bible verse, Proverbs 14:12, which tells us there's a path before each person that seems right, but it ends in death. I truly believe there's so much we could miss out on if we don't submit to God's plan that He has for our lives. I just want to encourage you through all the pain and the fear and the anxiety to just keep having faith, to take it one step at a time and to keep on digging. God was working through me in my silence, and I am where I am today because of my relationship with Jesus Christ.